The fundamentals are about as good as it gets right now that I've seen in my career. With virtually no new supply, the demand that we've talked about really allows us to really push earnings growth at a time where other sectors are going through a lot of supply that they have yet to digest. And so retail never really got oversupplied through different cycles. And now that we've absorbed a lot of that supply, we're really showcasing it in our earnings growth.
Hello, welcome to the REIT Report. I'm your host, Sarah Borgson-Keto. Today we're celebrating the 500th episode of the podcast, and to mark the occasion, I'm speaking with Conor Flynn, CEO of Kimco Realty and Nareit's 2025 chair. Conor has led Kimco since the start of 2016. He joined the REIT in 2003 as an asset manager and has held a variety of senior leadership roles, including COO and Chief Investment Officer. Conor is with me today to provide a close-up view of how a leading retail REIT is navigating today's complex market environment. So, Conor, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I mentioned just now, you're Nareit's chair for 2025, which to date has seen its fair share of market volatility and uncertainty. How has this impacted sentiment and performance across the REIT industry as a whole?
Well, the REIT industry is one that's built for going through multiple cycles. And I think when you look at the REIT industry overall, it's really showcasing the importance of flexibility, strong balance sheets, and really focusing on high quality assets and supply constrained markets. So sector by sector, depending on which sector you're looking at, there's really I think a shining light on how REITs are built for these types of disruptions and being able to not only weather this storm, but to come out even stronger. I think when you look at scale, that's important. Diversification is important. And, really obviously operational discipline and strategic tenant mixes to allow you to not be concentrated. So those are the types of things that I think really help weather the volatility, and REITs are showcasing that today.
And turning to your own retail sector, what are some of the dominant themes or issues that you and your peers have in common at this time?
Yeah, the retail sector is obviously a number of different sectors all combined. So when you look at the open air shopping center sector, which Kimco is a big part of, that really showcases the resiliency. I think the resiliency of both the consumer as well as the resiliency of the tenant base. So we've gone 13 years now of virtually no new supply. There's actually more office being constructed today than there is retail. And so we're the lowest amount of new supply of any commercial real estate sector. So that obviously is a big benefit, and it's showcasing in the occupancy side because occupancies now are at all-time highs. Even with some disruption from tariffs and some smaller bankruptcies, retailers are continuing to expand their footprint and have identified that the store-based is really the best opportunity and the most profitable to service the consumer in as many ways as possible. So you see sort of the pricing power that landlords have today. You see the opportunity set to continue to push occupancies near all-time high. And if a tenant files bankruptcy, a lot of our best-in-class retailers are buying those bankrupt tenant leases out of bankruptcy, and they have to step right into that lease. So there's no downtime, no costs. And so that's one of the biggest interesting components that we're seeing today that really showcases that supply and demand balance.
What would you say are some of the biggest steps that Kimco has undertaken under your leadership to position itself to succeed amid a changing business environment and also shifting consumer preferences?
So retail is constantly evolving. That's one of the things that I love about retail, and it's what makes the job super challenging, but super rewarding as well. So at Kimco, we're constantly trying to think long and hard about how do you create a level of defense that makes your shopping center more adaptable, as well as connecting with those consumers that constantly change their habits. And we continue to focus on convenience and value. And we think that that really is the sweet spot of where consumers are focused today. And so the convenience piece is how do we acquire, how do we redevelop assets that are conveniently located to how people live, work, and play? And so if you're living in a neighborhood and you drop your kids off at school, typically a Kimco shopping center is either on the way there or on the way home. Or if you live in a certain area and work in an office that's in the first ring suburb, typically a Kimco shopping center is near where that office's location is positioned. And so we constantly try and evolve the portfolio to look how we go about acquiring and redeveloping great real estate so that it adapts to people's lives. And that's that convenience factor. The value factor is the other piece, which is where we focus on grocery anchored and essential goods and services. And so typically a Kimco shopping center has a grocery anchor that drives traffic multiple times a week. And then we fill it with other surrounding retail uses that complement that anchor. Sometimes it can be services like medical has been a big boost, health and wellness, beauty, fitness. Typically, the other anchor in a Kimco shopping center was what we call a treasure hunter. Those are like the TJ Maxx, the Home Goods, Home Sense, Marshalls, Ross, Burlington. The off price sector continues to be a great traffic generator because when you go into that store, it literally is like a treasure hunt. You go in, you see something you love, you buy it that day, and if you don't buy it, it's not going to be there tomorrow. And so those are the types of uses that we continue to showcase that adds value to people's lives. And again, focuses on the essential goods and services that are so important today and are more resilient through different economic cycles.
And you've mentioned scale a lot in the past. What are the advantages of scale? And do you have an ideal scale in mind for Kimco?
So scale for us, I think, is super important because it creates not only efficiencies of scale, but advantages of scale. And Kipco has always been a very efficient operator. Milton Cooper, our founder, ingrained in us that you have to be as efficient as possible because every dollar you save goes directly to your shareholders. And so that is something that has always been ingrained in the Kimco DNA. And so what we look to do is try and utilize our scale to take advantage of that by buying goods at a discount if you're buying in bulk. So it could be sourcing HVAC units, it could be sourcing, irrigation systems, it could be sourcing roofing materials, you name it. On a shopping center, obviously, there's a lot of different goods that we buy that we can buy in bulk. We own over 100 million square feet. So again, spreading out that cost in a way where it creates more advantages of scale is super important on the efficiency side, operations side. On the leasing front, we feel like our scale advantage really showcases in that relationship and platform advantage. If you're a retailer and you're looking to do 10 locations in a geographic concentration, say like Florida, we can give you the opportunity to do all of those or even a lion's share of those with Kimco. So that again, you have a trusted partner, a trusted landlord that's going to deliver on its promises. Many times, shopping centers could be owned by individuals that are not as sophisticated in the construction material or the construction process, especially for an anchor tenant. And so we found that the relationship part of our business is super important because the retailers have been struggling to fill their new store opening plans because of the lack of supply. And so we've identified that as a real opportunity for Kimco to say, hey, find your opportunities with Kimco because we're going to deliver on those and make sure that you hit your new store opening plans.
And you've touched on this already, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about leasing. How would you say today's environment compares with what you've seen during your tenure at Kimco? And what about efforts to backfill tenant bankruptcies?
Yeah, it's a really interesting dynamic today in the leasing environment. So retention levels, so the tenants staying in place when their lease is up at maturity is at the highest it's ever been. It's over 90%. So that retention rate is creating a lot of stickiness to your tenant base, meaning that you don't have the churn that you normally see in my career and in retail in general, is that you've seen a lot of tenants churn, meaning like they not only maybe go out of business, but they'll jump across the street or down the road to a location if they get a better economic deal. So what's happened? The retention rates being that high, they can't jump across the street or jump down the road because that space that they would think is available is no longer available. Occupancy rates are at all-time highs. So again, because of that stickiness factor, tenants are less likely to move. And so when a space becomes available, it's a unique opportunity to push rents to market and then create a bidding war for identifying who the best in class retailers are that fills a void in the market. And so what we try and do is identify retailers that are going to drive traffic and enhance the merchandising mix of the shopping center. So whether it's your coffee or donut or bagel guy in the morning, your grocer, your quick service restaurant, your medical, your health and wellness, your fitness during the day, or your sit down restaurants and some of your other services that come alive at night. And those are the types of retail uses that we try and attract to fill into our shopping centers to create multiple trips during the week, but also dwell time. We want to make sure that someone comes and stays at the shopping center longer. And so what we've found is that typically the service industry was a component, but a smaller component of the shopping center. And now all of a sudden, this past quarter, over 80% of our new deals were done in the service industry. And again, we actually like that because if you think about what do you need to do at a shopping center that you can't do online? Doctors, pediatric urgent care, health and wellness, all of those services that get people to the shopping center physically to get those services. And so that's why we like this continuing evolution of the shopping center to actually gain share and gain time from people to come to the shopping center and use their own time and effort to visit the center.
What is it that you really want to see from a business in order to make them a very compelling addition to your lineup? And at the same time, how important is it to foster new ideas in the retail sector?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if you think about, we talked about supply. So now this is about demand and where that demand is coming from. So the traditional shopping center demand has been concentrated over the years. It's typically concentrated by your grocers and by our off-price category. Those are the two most dominant anchor categories that have been expanded. The nice part about today is the demand is diversified and then the depth and breadth is very healthy. And so you have the ability to look across different sectors, different uses, and see really what's the best use for that shopping center and what's the best economic deal to create the most value at that shopping center. And so, depending on the size and depending on the location, you typically have an array of tenants that are going to be looking to expand in good quality locations. So, we can take it step by step. So, if you're looking at a pad, so what we call an outfront parcel, so that's typically where you see a McDonald's or a quick service restaurant or a financial institution like a Chase Bank that loves the visibility from that upfront parcel. Those are what we call pads. The demand there is significant. You've got sort of the traditional folks like the McDonald's, like the Chase, still doing deals, wanting to do expand their footprint. Now you've got a lot of new tenants that are coming to the shopping center that also want that location. So one of the newer uses that we really like is Raising Cane's. Raising Cane's, Chick-fil-A, those are the types of players that are getting super aggressive to really capture that market share and get that location. Chipotle is another great one that's still continuing to get aggressive. Shake Shack getting very aggressive. Kava. Those are the types of users that are super aggressive for those types of areas that continue to drive demand for those locations. Now, if you're an anchor tenant, we talked about grocery stores, we talked about off price. There's other uses now that are very aggressive in terms of expansion. Fitness is a big one for us. Fitness continues to be, again, one of those uses that drives people to the shopping center and gets them up and out of their home. And so what we've seen is like traditionally, there's the high-end fitness players like the Lifetime Fitness. They're really sort of almost like a country club. They've taken it to a whole other level in terms of services and offerings that you really can't find anywhere else. But then there's also like the discounter offerings that we like as well. Planet Fitness, for example, very aggressive in terms of expansion. And those are uses that fit in well with a shopping center because, again, where it's located, it's typically on your daily route. So we can be a point of contact with that consumer. And so you look across whether it's sporting goods, with Dick's, they have their new concept, House of Sport. They also have Golf Galaxy. Academy Sports is also expanding. You look at books, Barnes and Noble is back expanding in a big way. They continue to be a very strong growth component and want to look at space across the portfolio. You have a myriad of grocers growing from Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Sprouts, Aldi, Lidl, ethnic grocers, traditional grocers, Costco, Walmart, BJ's, you name it, in terms of the mass merchants that are growing. So you really have a nice diversity of demand to continue to drive occupancy and to create the best-in-class merchandising mix.
I also wanted to ask you about your small businesses. When I was doing my research, I saw that some of them had signed their first leases really decades ago. What's driving that success?
So small businesses, again, what we call small shops, is typically categorized by spaces occupied less than 10,000 square feet. So when you get into that smaller category of space, it really opens up a wider array of uses. And that's really the beauty of our business, is it continues to be, I think, a gravitational pull from a wide array of small shop uses. So it was traditionally mom and pop retail, right? If you think about like the local family run restaurant, the local pizza parlor, those still are in the shopping center, but really the national and regional players have been continuing to grow aggressively. So the lion's share of our new business and our new deals are done with more national and regional players because they are super aggressive about growth plans. And so those are the ones like quick service restaurants we talked about, service providers. You're seeing a lot of wellness, so medi spas, physical therapy, a lot of medical coming out of the hospital into the like urgent care, pediatric urgent care, vet clinics, emergency vet clinics, hair salons, nail salons. All of those uses continue to be a big driver of small businesses. And we continue to love the quick service restaurant as well. Those are ones that we see a lot of growth. Jersey Mike's obviously going gangbusters. A lot of different players from coffee to sandwiches to Mexican to salads to you name it. It seems like there's a long, long list of operators that want to be in shopping centers today.
Conor, what are some other areas of growth for Kimco, particularly in the development and redevelopment of assets, so that you can achieve the highest and best use of your real estate?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, highest and best use of our real estate is really the focus of Kimco. So, for the last 5 years, we've been focused on entitling the highest and best use, which is typically apartments in our parking lots. So, if you think about a shopping center, we usually have a big field of parking and a single tenant, single story building that has retail in it. And so, that's a very underutilized play if it's a very dense area. So, what we've done is really circled our parking lots to say this is a lot of untapped potential that we can focus on unlocking in the future. So we set a goal to get to 12,000 apartment units entitled across the portfolio, and we just crossed that goal last quarter earlier than we anticipated. Now we continue to see that evolving as technology continues to evolve how we use driverless cars. We've even seen some of our retailers, and we're starting to engage with the drone deliveries for quick service restaurants. So how does that work? I think it's a positive for us because it creates even more value of those parking lots to do something else, to unlock the highest and best use. And so we continue to outline a strategy where our shopping centers are going to evolve because they're the most underutilized form of commercial real estate. And so we've activated over 3,000 apartments. We continue to add one or two projects a year to that pipeline. In addition to the retail redevelopment, which is again creating more retail space where we can, whether it's a pad up in front for the likes of Raising Cane's or Shake Shack or Kava or Starbucks, or expanding a box for a larger user. Those types of opportunities typically drive return on cost of over 10%. And all of those equal higher earnings growth, so higher FFO per share. And that's really where we're focused on. We were one of only two shopping centers to do over 5% FFO growth last year. We want to be in that same elite group year in and year out. And all of those components that we have will add up to that growth profile continuing to improve.
Are there other forms of ancillary income that you're weighing? I think I saw you're looking at solar power on rooftops as one example.
Yeah. I think actually, Sarah, it's a good question. So there's a lot of different uses for ancillary income that we have explored, and it's growing double digits year over year. And it's a nice business for us to continue to explore and experiment with. I think technology continues to give us more uses of what we can do. Because if you think about it, what do we control? We control our rooftops, we control our parking lots, and we control most of the common area spaces. And so what we do is look at different ways to activate those to create additional revenue sources. And so solar has been a nice one for us as we continue to activate both the rooftops as well as creating solar parking fields so you can park underneath the solar panels when you drive in. There's lots of other advertising opportunities as well. If you think about what we have, in many cases, it's almost like a billboard. So when you're driving past a shopping center, we've been doing advertising on those billboards that we have, or what we call pylon signs that face the main artery of the traffic intersection. We also can do it in the parking lots. We've done all sorts of different advertising in the parking lots. I remember when I was living in California, there was a big movie coming out. And what we did was the movie theater wanted to advertise in our parking lots, and they were, in essence, advertising the new release coming soon so that people would get excited about going to see the movie. So all of those different things, you can do from the very small things of like recycling bins to the very large things like solar panel fields. So those are all exciting things that we're exploring.
Conor, we've covered a great many aspects of Kimco and how it operates today. Is there anything else you'd like listeners to take away from today's conversation?
I think Kimco's in a great position for future growth. Think about our balance sheet. We're one of only 11 REITs that are A- rated. So we've done a really good job, I think, of prioritizing deleveraging the balance sheet, putting ourselves in a position to weather any type of storm. We talked about cyclical nature of the business. The balance sheet is so important for Kimco, and it really allows us to be, I think, more of an opportunist than someone that can be a victim when things do turn. And we all know all of these businesses in real estate are cyclical. And so giving ourselves an advantage like that should allow us to continue to be an outperformer, even if things get tough. And then the fundamentals are about as good as it gets right now that I've seen in my career, with virtually no new supply, the demand that we've talked about. really allows us to really push earnings growth at a time where other sectors are going through a lot of supply that they have yet to digest. And so retail never really got oversupplied through different cycles. And now that we've absorbed a lot of that supply, we're really showcasing it in our earnings growth. So we're cautiously optimistic that we're well positioned and want to be obviously a REIT of choice for investors.
Conor, I really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Sarah.
And to our listeners, you can find a full list of earlier episodes of the REIT Report on your favorite podcast platform.